Well, first of all, it's going to be worse under Harris as well. It's not just Trump. It's just that whoever is elected, I think the inflation problem is going to grow larger over time. And that's because all of the factors that are driving inflation are going to get worse. We're going to have much larger deficit spending over the next 4 years than we've had over the prior 4 years. I mean, that's just a trend.
Welcome back to the channel. Aaron here from Bitcoin Bros. And in today's clip, we'll be checking out Peter Schiff. He's going to be talking about how inflation could be sending us into a recession. He's going to be talking all about inflation in today's video. I recommend you guys watch this one until the end. He also talks about how Bitcoin is a fad and how you should be looking to own some gold. Now, you know, we are the Bitcoin Bros. We'd like to give you guys different perspectives on some respected investors just around the world, and Peter Schiff is definitely somebody who is respected. So make sure to watch this one to the end. Hit the like button, subscribe. We have new videos coming out every single day. But let's go ahead and jump into the clip here.
We have an explosion in entitlements, which no candidate wants to touch. In fact, Donald Trump wants to increase Social Security because he wants to stop taxing it. That's the same thing as an increase in benefits. But nobody is going to do anything about interest on the national debt, which is spiraling out of control. Now it's over $1 trillion a year. It's the third biggest line item in the budget, more than national defense. But in another year or two, it's going to be bigger than Social Security and Medicare. And again, those expenses are going to be growing. So the pressure on the Fed to return to quantitative easing in an even bigger way than it's done in the past is going to be extreme. And so I think the inflation, which is basically quantitative easing, it's printing money to monetize government deficit spending. We're going to have bigger deficits under either Trump or Harris. And the Fed is going to create even more inflation to finance them. And the dollar is going to go lower. You know, we're already at a 13-year low against the Swiss franc, about 7% away from an all-time record low. The dollar is going to start breaking down against other fiat currencies. Gold at an all-time record high, above 2,500, getting ready to move quite a bit higher. So these are early signs that the Fed's upcoming rate cut is a policy mistake. In fact, the Fed stopped hiking too soon. It should have hiked rates more, but it stopped because the banks started to fail. Not because it won the battle against inflation, but because the collateral damage in the financial sector was too great. And it's going to be great in the government, in corporate America, households. So you're going to see more impetus to lower rates, despite inflation rising and ultimately making new highs. So it's unfortunate. And I wish people didn't regard Trump as a panacea. We can't just elect him and all of a sudden America is going to be great again. In fact, he didn't make America great the first time he was president. The budget deficits got bigger. The trade deficits hit record highs. So Trump did nothing in his first term to really turn the tide. And I'm hopeful, but not, I don't expect him to do anything different in his second.
But I think the most pertinent thing that people need to understand before they make any investments, really, particularly now, is inflation and the impact that inflation is going to have on the decisions that they make on their savings and their investment. Because inflation is probably a bigger threat now than it's ever been. And therefore, it's a even bigger factor in determining everything that we do and ultimately what the rewards are going to be or the returns from your investments. And the reason I think that inflation is a bigger problem now than it's been in the past is because of the fiscal predicament that most of the major governments have, put themselves in. And the fact that all politicians, unfortunately, and this is a fatal flaw in democracy, is that politicians first and foremost care about themselves and their own political career and their own reelection. That's what they do for a living. They are career politicians. And so, like anybody else, they're concerned about perpetuating their career. And most people who are in politics, they really enjoy it. I mean, they like all the perks that come with it. You get a lot of respect if you're United States. You're a congressman, you're a senator. It's a career that a lot of people would aspire to. And once you get there, once you get to Washington, and I'm sure this is true in every country in Europe and all around the world, that you like it, right? You like the lifestyle, you like the prestige that comes with being a government official. So you want to stay there, right? Well, how do you stay in office? Well, you got to keep getting elected. In the United States, we get elections every 2 years, right? So politicians are very concerned about, the polls, and they're constantly got their finger in the air, seeing where the winds are blowing, and they don't want to say anything or do anything that might jeopardize their reelection. And of course, one of the most important things that you need to get reelected is you need a lot of money. You need to spend money on advertising, on television, which is expensive. And so you tend to cater to donors, whether it's a corporation or a union, anyone that can provide a lot of money. You need to do things that are in their interest. And so what is usually sacrificed by these politicians is the national interest. Doing what's right for the country is secondary to doing what's right for themselves, which unfortunately we have now fiat currency, where governments don't need gold, real money. They could just create paper money out of thin air, right? They could just manufacture it digitally, and there it is. That enables governments to spend without collecting taxes. They run these large deficits, and they're able to print the difference and hand out that money so they can give people money without also taking the money away. And now they don't mind taking money away from rich people because, there's not as many of those, right? So they don't lose as many votes, although certain rich people can donate a lot to their campaigns, which often, prevents the taxes from getting too high. But inflation, right, you asked for the definition. Inflation is really just another tax because governments create inflation. And inflation is also probably one of the most misunderstood words in the English language, and deliberately so. I think governments around the world kind of led the campaign to redefine inflation. So if you go back to the origin of the word, and if you have a dictionary, even from the 1980s, a Webster's dictionary, you'll get the real definition of inflation. So inflation is an expansion of the money supply. That's all it is. Deflation is a contraction of the money supply. So if you even think about the word inflate is to expand, like a balloon. If you fill a balloon with air, it expands. So with inflation, what's being expanded is the money supply. And who expands the money supply? Governments. Or they do it generally now through a central bank, but it's the central banks of these governments that are expanding the money supply. Now, when you expand the money supply, you have more money. Well, if you have more money, but you don't have more stuff to buy, well, the price of everything goes up. That's just basic economic supply and demand. The more money there is, the less each individual monetary unit is worth. And now prices go up. Now, what governments have done is they've said, price is going up. That's inflation. No, it's not. That is the consequence of inflation, because prices don't expand, prices go up and down as a result of inflation. Now, what happens is sometimes prices don't go up, but you still have inflation. And that's because without that inflation, prices would have gone down. And if prices don't go down because government creates inflation, that still represents a loss to the people because they lost the benefit of lower prices. Because in capitalism, the tendency of capitalism is to reduce prices. That's why it's so good, because you keep coming up with better ways of producing, more efficient ways, economies of scale. If you look at the CPI, for example, in the United States in 1800, and then you look at the same CPI in 1900, and they have the data, prices were cut in half. You had a 100-year period where you had deflation or, the money or prices falling for 100 years. And that was a good thing. All the politicians now tell us that we need prices to go up, that we must have inflation, the way they define it, of 2% a year. Why? Why do prices have to go up every year? Why can't they go down every year? Isn't that better if stuff gets cheaper? If the cost of living goes down? Of course it is. But these politicians are trying to sell this lie to the public that rising prices are somehow necessary for prosperity.
But what we do have to worry about is something that's much riskier, and that is that the confidence in Bitcoin collapses, and there goes the price, because Bitcoin derives its value from the same way that fiat currency does. It's a belief system. People have to have confidence that people will want it in the future. And if that confidence goes away, then the price crashes. That is a big risk. I would rather take the risk that the counterparty goes bad, because people trust counterparties. That's part of capitalism. It's the beauty of capitalism. You have reputations. You compete for reputations. If people couldn't use counterparties, there'd be no insurance industry. All insurance is based on a counterparty risk. I buy life insurance. I buy fire insurance, auto insurance, health insurance. It's all based on the belief that the counterparty is going to pay the claims, and they work, right? This industry functions well, and so a monetary system based on gold functions well. The fact that you have to trust somebody, that's no big deal. People have been trusting people to hold their gold for centuries, and it works. What I don't want to trust is that a digital string of meaningless numbers that somebody wants to buy today because they think somebody else will pay a higher price. I don't want to put my confidence that that's going to last, that that's more than just a fad, a passing fancy that's here today and is going to be gone tomorrow. The reason they own gold is to back up the dollar. Because if there was a run on the dollar and the U.S. government had to support the price, how would they do it? They would have to take gold and sell it into the market and buy dollars. We don't have any Forex reserves. Our reserves are gold. And if the U.S. government had to dump a bunch of Bitcoin on the market to prop up the dollar, the Bitcoin would crash even faster than the dollar. There's no way that Bitcoin could back up the dollar when the Bitcoin has even less value than the dollar. You need gold. Central banks have been buying gold for years now. They're accumulating gold. None of them are buying Bitcoin. All you got is El Salvador. That's the one country that owns Bitcoin. But all the real countries in the world are buying gold. All the big BRIC countries, they're not buying any Bitcoin, right? If Bitcoin was so great, why aren't the Chinese buying it? Why aren't the Russians buying it, right? Why aren't the Indians buying it? They're buying gold. They're not buying Bitcoin. Gold didn't fail. People failed. Governments failed. The people failed to stay on a gold standard through governments. Because again, governments don't like a gold standard. It means you have to balance the budget. It means you can't buy votes anymore. You have to live within your means. No politician wants to do that. So the politicians were able to break free of the shackles that gold provided. Now, I think in this next currency crisis, when things are really bad and there's massive inflation and now you have price controls and shortages and black markets, there's going to be a movement to go back to gold, because it's going to be the only way to restore confidence in a monetary system. But before that happens, the only reason that private companies don't provide an alternative is just because of the cost. And the main cost is government regulation. If you didn't have all these AML, KYC, all these laws, it would be very easy, very simple for gold to be reintroduced into the monetary system, and it would be adopted almost immediately by everybody. But governments are creating these barriers to that with regulations and putting people in jail if they try to use gold as money and stuff like that. I mean, most sellers of goods and services would prefer to get paid in gold. I mean, gold is a better way to get paid, especially as inflation really starts to pick up and you start to worry that if I sell these products and I take paper, what happens if, the paper collapses and I can't even rebuy my inventory because the prices have gone up? So I think as inflation really becomes entrenched, merchants are going to look to accept real value in exchange for whatever goods or services they have to sell. And the best monetary instrument is gold.